What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of the Surf and Sales Podcast. I am Scott Leese, co-founder of the Surf and Sales Summit and co-host of this podcast, along with my good friend and partner in crime, Richard Harris. What's going on, Richard?
Just excited for this episode because, again, this is another one of the ones where we will try to seduce our guest into attending the Surf and Sales Summit in Costa Rica.
Yeah, we'll find out if this guy's a beach guy or a mountain guy or more like a house cat and just wants to stay inside on his couch the whole time. We're talking with one of the elder statesmen, if you will, in the sales game. I'm pretty excited because I think that I'm the youngest person on this call right now, which is really making me feel like real good compared to my two older brothers there. We're going to be joined by CEO, author, fractional sales enablement leader, keynote speaker, former senior vice president, sales leadership guru, Roderick Jefferson from Roderick Jefferson and Associates. Before we introduce him and bring him on, Richard is going to tell everybody about HubSpot, our wonderful sponsor. Kick it off, Richard.
Yeah, I want to talk about HubSpot and the Hubspot Podcast Network. Thank you so much for sponsoring. I want to talk about the AI approach that HubSpot's bringing, right? They lead with this understanding around the research that's out there that says, AI can get rid of manual tasks, which I know we all want to do. It can pull reports, summarize data. It could even do some of your outbound prospecting if you needed. And it can save anywhere from, half hour to 2 hours a day, depending on how you use it, what your role is. And, that's a minimum of 2.5 hours a week, 5 hours a week. Multiply that over a year. Like, what could you do with that extra time? How much money is being left on the table? So, please be sure to check out HubSpot AI's tools so they can try to help you streamline these processes. And they've got everything from ChatSpot to Content Assistant, all in the CRM. And check them out at HubSpot.com. All right, Scott, back to you.
We should do a whole episode where you and HubSpot attempt to onboard me in my technology deficiency and just see what a train wreck that would be.
Scott, there are two issues there. One is I learned a long time ago never to try to teach anybody how to ski. Second is never try to teach Scott much about technology.
Anything. Yeah.
About equally frustrating.
Good way to live. Roderick Jefferson, welcome to the Surf and Sales Podcast, man. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Good to see you both again.
Yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about what you're up to these days so they have some context for your expertise.
Sure. So as you said earlier, fractional sales enablement later, a revenue enablement, out there working with small to mid-sized companies, kind of in that 10 to 150 million, helping them to either establish and put together enablement function or up-leveling them. And I think the great thing is, and the word is fractional, be able to come in on a project basis, help them out either short-term, long-term, mid-range.
Well, let's hold on, Richard. Before you already interrupt me, and the very first time I go to ask a question, this might be a record. Can we define revenue enablement? Because I feel like it has lots of different definitions, and some people, maybe me, don't exactly know what that means.
Sure, you're right. I think if you ask 10 people, you'll probably get 12 different answers. And so why don't I throw mine in the hat as well? To me, revenue enablement is all about integrating strategy, processes, and technologies to optimize the entire customer lifecycle. And that's from lead gen all the way out to post-sale expansion and retention. It's also about connecting the dots and aligning sales, marketing, customer success, client services, revenue ops, finance, HR, all the lines of business so that we're all not just in the same boat, but rowing in the same direction with a common goal of ultimately sustaining revenue growth.
See, that sounds really good at a enterprise level. What if I'm not there yet, right? And maybe the better question is, when does a startup start to look at revenue enablement, as an actual role, right? Because, early on, 5-10 people in the company, you're just trying to get customers, right?
Absolutely.
Trying to create a baseline of stuff. What, in your opinion, when do people go, okay, it's time to hire my first sales ops or rev ops person?
I think it's at that, to your point, you just hit, you've got 5 people. It's time to really start thinking about enablement, because Otherwise, what's going to happen is a couple things. One, you've got a sales leader who is, one, generally not focused on enablement. They're focused on closing deals, let's be honest. And secondly, these are not the people most of the time that you want out there trying to enable in sales, and train your people. And the reason is you only get what's in their mind. They're not coming with that kind of long tail mindset of enablement being kind of that marathon of ongoing. We always think about onboarding, and I'm glad you bring that up. But what happens when these people are already on board and they're rolling, right? Now you've got your sales leaders focus on closing deals, and you think they're going to be out there trying to up-level the skill set of their people. And most of the time, that's not going to happen. You need somebody that is really focused 24/7 on making sure that you're building out consistency, scalability, repeatability. Otherwise, you're kind of recreating the wheel over and over and over.
But when do you do that? When you have 2 sales reps, 3 sales reps, and a leader? Like, as soon as you have a sales leader, like in your mind, when do you think that becomes something more than a discussion?
3 to 5 people in that range, because now
in
the sales range. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Because otherwise they're going to start kind of, hey, you got this cool thing over here. Can I use this? Can I borrow this? And
are you starting with the mindset of enablement, or are you starting it a little bit more with a mindset of operations to solidify the operations so that you can start to scale the enablement piece?
I think it has to be concurrent, Rich. And the reason I say that is, and I'm not trying to avoid it, let me step back. Get the ops pieces in place first. And that's kind of the baseline, if you will, the slab of building the house. Then you bring in your enablement person, and now we can start putting the white paper, the black paper, the windows, and the framing and around that piece. But if you don't have the basics of operations, it's going to be difficult for us.
Got it. What do you think the biggest resistance is from people?
I think the biggest resistance is we're viewed as either a cost center, or B, the fixers of broken things and broken people. I think that lends itself to not really clearly understanding and being able to define the value that we bring and the why behind why you need an enablement function or person at least.
I think the fixer of broken things and broken people is like the single best phrase that I've heard in a really, really long time. I've never heard of that before. Did you just make that up right now, or have you been using that for a while?
No, been saying it for a while, because that's kind of how we've been viewed, we in enablement. Kind of that junk drawer where you've got a battery, you've got a flashlight, you got an old sock, right? And anything you need, there's a Phillips in there, a hammer, whatever it may be. We're not that. We are not here to fix things. We are here literally to partner and to help grow, solidify, and then iterate and push that increase around revenue.
That's so good. The fixer of broken things and broken people. Maybe
IT has that worked out, Scott. They can have it.
Well, we're gonna steal it. Maybe we'll make that the title of the episode.
That's what I
like it.
One of the things that I heard you say, which I loved hearing, was the inclusion of retention and expansion in this kind of revenue enablement function. So I'm going to ask you like a difficult question, and I'm going to try to force you to not say, well, it depends, Scott. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Who owns expansion and upsell revenue?
CX, customer success.
Okay. Tell everybody why. I'm in agreement, by the way. So
because I think there's a couple of reasons. One, revenue drives behavior, and they are compensated to make sure that they focus on upsell, cross-sell, renewals, and maintaining and building those customers for life. The other is most salespeople are focused on net new, and I'm going to go even beyond people. Companies are focused on that net new logo over and over and over. It's mandatory, it's needed. But at the same time, if you build this big, beautiful house with a short hallway and they attrit out of the back door, that helps no one.
Yeah. I mean, so how do you get, I think just the creation of the customer success role, right? I don't think it's anybody's fault. We've gravitated as an industry to those reps not being sales, right? We want them to be customer. We've redefined customer centric, and we probably over-engineered it, right? So how do you help, and I do this, right? I work with teams, but how do you help get that customer success team that doesn't like sales to own this, right? And from an enablement, because there's a skill thing, which they're pretty good at actually. And then there's the mindset, which I think is the biggest detractor. How do you approach that mindset?
Absolutely. Great question. And I think it's actually easier than we make it. To your point, we over-engineer this. The key is, one, not trying to train and enable CSMs the same way we do with salespeople, right? I think everyone should have a baseline understanding of your services, your offerings, your buyer's journey, et cetera. But that's where it should also separate. Because to me, that back end post sale, it's about helping. It's not about selling. And goes to that point you were saying about mindset, right? I'm not asking you to go sell them anything. What I'm asking you to do is go out and start having conversations and stop giving presentations first and foremost. Go out and understand what's going on with them. What are the changes? What's happening in their space? What's happening from maybe an M&A perspective, a change of new products that they're releasing, what's going on in the competitive landscape, and then go back and have those conversations with them around things that they can only get by having that relationship with your company. And the second piece is, and this is the piece that gets left out so often, guys, and that is we learn everything about the company, and very rarely do we actually ask one of the, I think, of the most important questions that go unasked the most. And that is, so Mr. and Mrs. Customer, what can we do as a company to help you personally? Can we get you out of the doghouse? Can we put your name in lights? Can we get you a bigger voice? Can we help get you promoted? Because we all know right now that the wrong decision can be career limiting. And so find out what's important, not just to the company and their goals, but also for that individual. Because we're always screaming about, oh, I want a champion. What's the best way to do it? It's the same way we do in real life. You get to know that person, you find out what's important to them, then you ask them a bunch of questions, then you say, hey, I got a little experience on this, or I've heard about this, or I've seen this happen. This may work for you. How don't we do the same thing in corporate?
It's like I do the same thing, but I phrase it maybe a little bit differently. And I say, what can I do to help you personally? What can I do to help your team, your direct reports? Mm-hmm. And what can we do to help the whole company? So like goes from individual to their team to the whole company, which I believe is sort of the pecking order that most employees kind of operate. They often care about and worry about themselves first, then their team, then actually the company.
Absolutely. So imagine if that question is never actually asked.
Yeah.
You're only getting, 40, 50% of the equation.
Yeah. And it's the level of passion behind their response is very muted if they're only thinking about, well, this will help my company. Great. They care a lot more than helps them, right?
Absolutely. I'm going to put a caveat in there, especially these days.
Yeah, especially these days.
Yeah. Scott, how do you think people think? They think about themselves first, then what?
Then their team, if they're in a leadership role, and then the company.
Yeah, which I think you just defined corporate politics. That's why corporate politics exists.
Yeah.
Selfish mode, right? How often are people doing things to figure out how to navigate their career first?
Yeah, but I think that the corporation wants you to think about the company first, the team first, and yourself last. And I think most people think about it the opposite way. And so when I sell, I try to appeal to the individual first, then their team, then the company kind of perspective, which I think was sort of similar to what Roderick was saying.
Yeah, and Richard, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Let's go back to the politics piece you're talking about. I think there's a small nuance where it moves from focusing on myself to it being really about just selfishness. And it's great, I think, to put yourself first, especially given what's going on in today's macroeconomics and what's happening out in the real world. Secondly, I think it also behooves people to never allow a company, a boss, a spouse, et cetera, to drive their career, because nobody has the vested interest that you do. Now, here's where the problem comes in. The problem comes in when we have hierarchy that says X line of business is more important than Y. And now we start to kind of erode that. Well, why are they up here? We're doing the same amount of work, or we're doing more than the other people are doing. It's something that comes and it's happens. And I don't care where you are. If there are 2 or 3 people in the company, there's going to be politics on some level, right? It's a matter of how it's mitigated and also the communication that goes on around, again, I'll say that word, why it happens, not just what happens.
It's a little bit maybe of like, there's always politics going on, but is it done in the light or is it done behind closed doors, like in the dark? Like there can be kind of, I know there's politics going on, but is it transparent? Is there a dialogue about it? Or is it all in the shadows and hidden away from everybody? And the ones that's done in the shadows, I think that's the one that really alienates people and freaks people out and people don't want any part of.
Very well said. I agree. It happens all the time. It's whether or not there's malice behind it or if it's not as simple as I can be.
Yeah.
I think look, we may not be agreeing here with us.
I think some of it too has to do with at the individual level, right? Like Scott, you know me, I tend to get paranoid about things when I don't hear about it. That doesn't mean a company's not being transparent. That's Richard's personality. That's on me. That's not on the company. So I think that's where, really understanding how your team operates and as a leader being transparent with them to help mitigate that to a certain extent, right? Because there's always stuff that's not discussed, but that doesn't mean it's done in the dark with a malicious intent, which I think is what you were talking about, Scott.
Yeah, I don't agree with you on this per usual. I think it is the company's responsibility because the company's responsibility is to get the most out of their people. So if I know that you need information or you get paranoid, and if you get paranoid, you shut down and don't perform, then my job as a officer of the company is to give you the information that you need that helps you perform at your best level. That's on the company. I'm an officer of the company, so therefore it's on me to do that for you. And you can't, I suppose, have every single person in the company involved in every single decision. That would be impossible, would make no sense. But there are so many things talked about behind closed doors for no reason. People have no idea what's going on. And most people err on the side of, well, it's none of their business, they should just focus on their job, versus err on the side of, you know what, if we kind of talk to people about what we're thinking and the direction that we're headed, they might be, a little more patient. They might be a little more bought into the mission and so forth. And I'm a firm believer in the latter. And I think most people operate in the former.
I'm going to look on both sides of this, guys, because I can see both sides, right? And one side, I'm all about clear, concise, and transparent communication. Because, to your point, it does mitigate a lot of issues out there, a lot of rumors and scuttlebutt. But on the other side, as an executive, not everything is for everyone. And sometimes we do need them to stay focused on the job that they're that they're responsible for. Because some people get, way, way out here away from what they're doing, and it takes away from their productivity. I think what it comes down to is communication and empathy, and also as a leader, knowing how much and when and why to share things. If it's something that's going to add productivity and it's going to remove all of that nonsense and silos and politics, or not even remove, mitigate, there's value in it. But if it's something that's going to throw people off and they're not able to focus, and we know our people, especially our teams, there are certain things we can share with some that we can't share with others, for the simple reason that everybody doesn't know what to do with that information or how to continue moving forward while knowing that and not getting nervous or concerned.
And I got a question for you, because we've never had this kind of conversation. I don't think anybody's ever really had a let's understand corporate politics conversation, so I'm excited. This goes back to the hard skills are the soft skills. Either of you ever have any training on how to figure this shit out? Because this is the part.
No.
And see, and that's the other part is we just assume because you have a certain level of tenure, experience, logos, or even title, you're just supposed to know this stuff.
Right.
Don't. Right. And that's why as a leader, I tell my team all the time, I'm going to screw up, and I give everybody on this team permission to do so. There is not one perfect person on the team. And I'm not that person either. Just because I may be at the top of the org chart doesn't mean that I'm the smartest in the room. And most of the time I'm generally not. And so, and also be honest. Look, this is the first time I've run into this. I've got a great network around me. I've got mentors. Let me go find out how this worked with other people and learn from what works and what doesn't. But if you pretend and you fluff and you try and bullshit these people, you lose all credibility.
I want to change topics away from the politics of the corporate world for a second. I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about, when in your sales career were you at your peak powers, your peak performance strength? Okay. And I want you to think about what is different now in the kind of sales arena and environment compared to back then. He's at his peak power right now, for all I know. I have no idea.
Scott, we had to have very strong fingers to dial a rotary dial on a phone. Scott and Roderick and I are old enough to remember those days.
Absolutely. You mean before that pound symbol was a hashtag? We're not going to go down that road.
I was thinking about this the other day, though. Like, when was I at my peak performance level, my peak powers, and could I operate the same way now as then? And what is different? And so that's what I'm trying to understand.
It's a great question. I'd say, honestly, it was probably about 10 years ago when I was at Oracle Marketing Cloud and had just left Salesforce and went over there. And I think the reason was there was so much freedom and autonomy and flexibility to try new things. And social media was what it is today, right? So it didn't put that pressure on of you had to put everything out there. The other thing was, I think there was more leeway and empathy around relationships than we focus on today inside of corporate. And what I mean is, I had a team that was global, and that is the closest team that I've ever had, because I felt like I was building an extended family. I wasn't building a team, if that makes sense. I know it sounds kind of hokey, but can ask anyone on that team, they'll understand exactly what that means. And for those that weren't, what it meant was we cared about each other. It wasn't just for us. It wasn't about ladder climbing or promotions or promoting. It was, we had a common cause. We loved what we were doing. It was some of the most passionate people I'd ever worked with. And we always pushed each other to be better, but and sometimes it was a hard nudge. Sometimes it was a soft push, but we always knew that it was each other's best interest in mind. And it wasn't just work. We knew about what was going on with their family life, with the kids, the graduations, the growing up, we shared parenting tips and things of that sort. I don't think we have that today. I haven't seen it for a while, to be honest. And I
think we automated it out.
Because part of it
made it out the soul.
Yeah, I think a part of it is we automated things. And secondly, we are so busy trying to do more with less right now, which I don't think is a real thing. But we're so focused at heads down, just plowing, moving forward, that we forget that empathy is one of the strongest tools out there beyond AI, beyond any of the automation, because relationships are the backbone of success, right? And I don't think that there's ever been a time where leading with humanity, empathy, and EQ has meant more than it does today. And I'm not just talking about active listening. I mean, really, truly showing empathy and caring for the people that you work with and that work under you or even above you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just wrote about this. It's not going to go out for a couple of days, but I just wrote about this topic of what does empathy really mean. There's a good article out there I just read today too from the Harvard Business Review, which sort of spawned my post. But go Google it on empathy, and for those who are listening. It's really, really good. We need to take a quick break here. And then, Roderick, I'm going to ask you the question I want you to answer. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about it while I do our quick little mid-roll. The question I want to ask is, because you're fractional, right? You're in that entrepreneurial space like Scott and I. So often people want to hire us for fractional roles, which is great, but they still expect full-time output, so to speak, right? Yeah. I'm curious to know how you navigate that. I have some basic answers, but I want to hear your thoughts on them. But first, we're going to take a quick break and give a shout out to our good friend, Mark Roberge, who has a podcast called The Science of Scaling, brought to you by the Hubspot Podcast Network. He spends time talking about the secret strategies and tactics to scale your company, and he brings in amazing guests. There is a great episode called Don't Lead with the Product, Lead to the Product, that I really like with Doug Ademic. So check that out on the Hubspot Podcast Network or wherever you like to get your podcasts. It's called The Science of Scaling with Mark Roberge. Roderick, what are your thoughts on the question I asked?
It goes back to communication and being deeply clear on what you're doing, what outcomes look like, what success looks like, and sometimes sticking to your guns on that. What I mean,
how do you say no? Because I agree. Like, it's all, yeah. Scott and I have a different opinion on this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I tend to be, okay, it's this many hours. This is how I'm going to do it. Here are the desired outcomes. Scott is shaking his head violently at me. He's about to.
Yes. I'm giving myself whiplash over here.
Right. So I agree, like, very clear expectations. And even when you do that, people like, oh, hey, could you go do this? Or, hey, could you do that? And it's sort of tangential to what you're doing, but it's not what you're supposed to be doing. Right. So what do you say to those clients? Because they're already a client at this point.
Oh yeah, of course. I've been in that situation like all of us has. And I think, first of all, being able to say no is oxymoronic for what people see as consultants. And I disagree on that. I think there has to be lines. Otherwise, you start falling into, again, becoming the fixer of broken things and broken people. So be very, very clear on what your deliverables are. Always go back to what you agreed upon in that SOW. Secondly is reminding why you're here as a fractional piece and saying no. Let me come back to the bottom line. Sometimes you just have to say no. And sitting in a bunch of meetings and updates and things of that sort, probably not your best use for them or for the money that they're paying you for. And so going back to reminding that, one, I'm not an employee. I am here as a partner to you to guide things along as a consultant. Secondly, here's what we agreed upon. By doing all these other things, I'm actually doing a disservice to you because we're not going to actually be able to meet those objectives. And neither one of us want to do that. The third is reminding over and over, sometime to the nth degree, these are the things that we have to do, and this is the time frame that we have to do it. And in order to do it, this is what it's going to take to get to those pieces. And I don't want to frustrate nor disappoint you. I put it back to them. I don't want to frustrate or disappoint you. So in order to do that, we need to get back on track. And then getting agreements on, are we now on the same page and moving back and the train's back on the track? If the answer is no, talk it through. Be human. All right, so what am I misunderstanding or not hearing that you are expecting that we did not agree up front? Look, things are going to shift, but things can't monumentally change. You can't say you're in the red zone and suddenly now all of a sudden you've pushed me back to the 50-yard line. You're wasting your money and also your time, and it's not the best use of skill set for your company.
Scott, I know you've been sitting on your hands. I
can see him over there chomping at the bit already.
He's like, I think he's going to need stitches in his bottom lip because he's been biting it so hard for
No. I agree on the clear communication part completely. Where I don't operate is like, it's going to take this many hours. You're going to get this many hours from me. Richard, I think, is over specific with some of that stuff. I also have a hard time tethering myself to results that I don't have 100% control over. So let's say, you know, we've all been in this position before. Like if you train somebody the right way how to sell something and they don't do it and don't get the result, that's not all on me. So I'm not tethering my performance based on that result, because I wasn't there all day to make sure they did what they were supposed to do. I wasn't there to coach them. Like, that's on you, right? So I avoid all of that kind of stuff. I also try to avoid specifics around due dates of deliverables, because a lot of the work that I do is a collaboration. So let's say, Roderick, you're my client and I don't know anything about your industry, okay? And you want help writing a sales script, okay? Well, I don't know shit about your industry, so I need you to deliver like a V1. I'll give you a template of a sales script, but you got to produce like a V1 to get me going, okay? Well, if we agreed on a due date of August 30th, and you don't get me that V1 until the morning of August 30th, I don't have time. I'm gonna miss the deadline. That makes me look bad, but it really wasn't my fault. So I have issues with some of these items right there. So for the work that I do, I avoid due dates. I avoid time stamps and things like that. I've done a very good job of essentially like removing myself from my compensation from those types of guidelines, or I don't know what the right word is. Mm-hmm. I end up not having to deal with some of that stuff. And Richard is bitter because he can't figure out how to implement a similar thing.
That's not true. I've actually gotten better at it.
How about that? Good. I don't think we're really disagreeing. It's just different
approaches.
Approach.
It goes back to know your audience, right? And so I don't think either one of them.
And communicate it up front too.
There it is. That's the key. It's communicating it up front so you know where you're going. I think there's some value. If you can get away with that, God bless you. I have not to date, right? They have to be time driven and also outcome. And I'm not talking about, I'm going to go back to something you said, Scott. I don't own the outcomes. They own that piece. What I do is I own that guided journey that gets you there. I will provide you with the advisory, with the tools, with the templates, with the best practices. What you do with it is up to you. And that's actually part of why I love being a consultant. I can't be held to something that I don't own and can't control.
Yeah.
I can get you to water. If you don't drink,
you probably had people who tried to tie your compensation into that result.
Early on, yeah. And the answer was no.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I cannot be compensated for something or even dinged for something that I have absolutely no control over.
There you go. So we're speaking the same exact language. And I think for anybody who's listening, who's in consulting or who's thinking about going into consulting, this is a very, very important point. And dig your heels on it and get clarity around it. So
yeah, and I think, Richard, that's why both you and I are so prescriptive around the depth of detail when we go into an engagement, because at that point you can come back and say, this is what you and I agreed upon. Right? If it's going to change, again, there's always alters and we all have to be flexible, but you can't go outside of that scope of work, because now you're asking me to do something that may or may not even be in my skill set, may not be something that's agreed upon, or what you need, quite frankly, just because it was a whim.
Yes, that's my whole thing, because I feel like that's where I could quote unquote upsell them to additional services, whereas Scott makes 3 times more money than you and I.
That's because he makes more than all of us.
So he probably charges for engagements than we do. So that's probably how.
Well, but maybe a differentiator is up front. I'm just like, I'll do everything. Like I don't care about the whim, because I'm like, whatever they bring up, I've dealt with before and I'll be able to handle. And therefore, maybe I can charge a premium and then avoid all the like subtle bullet points, because I'm just like, yeah, whatever comes up, we're going to deal with it. We're going to tackle it.
That's what I don't do. All right.
That I don't not
meaning today. So
Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But
maybe by saying you can do everything is great. For me, I've always believed I can do anything. I can't do everything. And the problem is they want to pull us into everything when you don't give them those.
But I think Scott's point is being able to say, look, I'll do everything. And if they ask you for something, it's like, well, yeah, I can do it, but it's not my strength. Scott would do that in that moment, I think, is how Scott would handle it.
Yeah, I probably would. I also just know that hearing that I can do everything is very comforting to people. And most people never ask for anything even remotely odd or out of scope. Right?
There's some value in that now. Huge.
Right. There you go.
Of comfortability by knowing I've got a guy that could do this, whether they ask or not, he could, or he has experience with it.
Yeah. Or
some value in that.
Or he can find somebody in a red hot second and do it or assist with it. Right. Anyway, great conversation. I've had a lot of fun. We're headed towards the end here. We want to give you a chance to ask us a question or two, or seek counsel, if you will.
How can we help you?
How can we help you?
First of all, thanks guys for the opportunity for this chat. Where I could, the question is, how can we get the word out of really the value of working with a fractional and enablement leader? And I'll be more specific of my company to show that value, because I think it's starting to gain groundswell, but we're not there yet.
Interesting.
Because we've been doing it with CEOs and COOs and CMOs for years. You say fractional CXO, they get it. What could we do to really raise the value of, because it's not just myself, there are a number of us that are fractional.
I actually feel like it's gained quite a bit of momentum, and it's like pretty damn popular now. So bear with me for a second. If you're trying to set all this stuff up, if you're a $5 to $150 million company, you're either trying to set it up for the first time, or you're trying to fix it because it's gone off the rails, right? Mm-hmm. So it's either a redo or a build for the first time, right? So you got a couple options. You can try to do it yourself, which almost never works, especially if a founder has no sales or revenue background, right? But I suppose that is an option. They can try to ask their early founding AEs to do it. That doesn't almost ever work because they don't know how to do all this kind of stuff, but that is an option that people try sometimes. They can try to hire a full-time VP of sales, head of sales for this type of thing. We all know how difficult that is to hire the right person. Most VPs of sales, once they've kind of been in the trenches once or twice, all they really want to do is be a VP of spreadsheets, and they just want to hire everybody to do all the work for them. So it's difficult to hit the bullseye, which is part of the reason why it's such quick turnover, and those people are very, very expensive. Or there's the other option, which is you work with somebody like one of us in a fractional kind of capacity to kind of act as a stopgap, and you partner, we build all these things and we help you kind of get to these milestones. We're like, okay, now it would make sense to hire a couple of AEs, and now it might make sense to hire a VP of sales. Those are really the options that people have. All right. I believe, and I see the trend, I think that more people than ever are open to this kind of fractional thing. The other thing that's happened is there has never been so many fractional VP of sales on the market, because so many of us who were VPs of sales, full-time employed W-2 people, we all got sick and tired of the corporate bullshit. That's what happened. We all got raked over
another technical term, Scott?
Yes, it is. We all got raked over the coals too many times. We all drank the Kool-Aid too many times. We all thought we'd make $1 billion too many times, right? So at some point, all of us are like, I can't do this game anymore. Let me try to help people on a different kind of capacity. And now people are kicking themselves out of the game into the fractional game way sooner. The likes of us, we did this kind of role a half dozen times. Some of these people now were a head of sales one time for like 6 months, and they're like, I'm a fractional CRO now. So the market is flooded with it. So I actually am having a different kind of experience than you because I think that the momentum is there and it's kind of more in the limelight than ever before. Richard?
Yeah, I agree. I think the challenge is it's a hot topic. People want to do it. They don't know what to look for. They don't understand the best practices, right? So, if I think I'm thinking like a founder, right? And my VC has said, grow revenue. Maybe they've said, go get a fractional CRO, don't hire someone yet, maybe whatever. What content's out there? Because that's the first thing I think founders do, particularly when we have technical founders who, are very, they like to do their research ahead of time, right? Like that's their thing. So do you have the content out there to help promote that? That's at that sort of, how do I go draw some people in? The other is you've just got to talk about it. You got to talk about best practices like we all do, right? Like it's in your LinkedIn posts and your videos. I was like, okay, so you want a fractional CRO? Great. Here are 5 things to avoid, right? Don't hire this person as a fractional CRO, right? Not what you should hire, but what you should. That's what makes you look like the expert because they're going to be like, yep, I don't want that. I don't want that. Okay. Roderick knows what I want. So to me, that's the kind of content that I would be doing.
Yeah. But, and what would help potentially, Roderick, is in terms of how to get that message out there. I think the most important question is how to hire the right fractional person. Because like I was saying, there's some kid out there who was in sales for a hot minute, who is now a fractional CRO, who will advertise that they'll do things on the cheap compared to somebody like you or I, Roderick, who's been in the seat a half dozen times, done it successfully all those times, elder statesman, right? We've been in the game for a long time. So how do you hire the right person? It's, do they have the chops? Have they done the actual role as an operator multiple times? And have they helped multiple companies as in a fractional kind of capacity that have had a good outcome? Then do you have the network? You got to have the network, Roderick, to bring referrals your way, to get introductions, to have people say, oh, you should talk to this guy, Roderick, right? And you got to have content that speaks to and educates the audience on what to look for, what somebody does, why it's important, what pains you solve. And that content shines a light, hopefully, towards your network and towards the chops that you possess.
This is where Richard's so tactical and Scott's so strategic.
You got, but you know what? In order to be a solid consultant, you've got to be tactically strategic, right? Or strategically tactical, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And that's what I see is missing. And to your point, you answered actually the second question I was going to ask you guys around what to look for, what not to look for. I want to ask a separate question now, and something we've been talking about. There's a lot of folks out there that were released, cut, whatever you want to look at, right? Out of a job. And like, to your point, now, I'll go be a consultant. In your, and this is to both of you guys now, if this is someone for the first time going out to this, because I think there's a number of folks out that are consulting now that shouldn't be. They're not consultants. They're literally should be working in-house, but this is an option for them. How do you, if you are someone that's looking at hiring a fractional enablement, what should they be looking for in kind of like top, to your point, beyond, you've hit it, the chops, the network, the content. If you're that person that's looking to go be a consultant, what do they need to know first? And what should they not do? You've given us the good, what you should do. How about what should they not do?
I think they should not believe that their first couple of customers are going to be their indication of long-term success. Their first couple of customers are going to be people they know. Mm-hmm. And which is good, right? There's nothing wrong with it. Get some logos, you do those things. And if they don't know how to leverage that, both from a network perspective and to content perspective, whatever that means for them, then they're going to fail. I also think that they also I don't think they understand some of the behind the scenes business shit you got to get done, right? Like all of a sudden being responsible for your own health insurance. fucking expensive,
Yeah.
right? Particularly a family. Like it ain't cheap, right? And so
No.
that's a piece. And then the third thing I would tell them is don't undervalue yourself. Don't
Glad you said that.
Yeah, don't think, well, okay, I could do this for $5,000. I know, Richard, Scott, and Roderick charge 10. It's like, well, why wouldn't you try to charge 10? You just lost $5,000. Yeah, I know you want a customer, but you still got a life to live, right? So there's a balance in there about understanding how to price yourself. Don't make the mistakes around pricing yourself the wrong way. Might be the right.
It's what should the new consultant not do? That's the question, right?
Yes.
I think they should, I think they should not tackle something that's completely outside of their ICP and experience. So, for example, a brand new consultant who spent their entire operating career selling to restaurants should probably not take on a consulting gig where the client is selling to the Inc. 100 and is trying to sell Disney and Coca-Cola. Even though the money, might be there. Like, you just haven't done that before, and you should be transparent about that. Number two, you should, to the best of your ability, stay away from bad money. Meaning, somebody who redlines every section of the contract, who's trying to negotiate down the payment terms, who doesn't want to do net 15, they want to pay you net 45, who is just like nitpicking everything. That person in the beginning is going to be equal or double a pain in the neck once you're actually engaged with them.
Mm-hmm.
So beware of that type of thing. And the last thing may surprise you. The same way we tell people, be careful relying on one stream of income in your W-2 role, and you should have a side hustle. The same thing is true for us who run our own businesses. If your only stream of income is your consulting business, I'm warning you that that is dangerous. So you still have to diversify. You still should write a book like Roderick did and get book royalties. That probably pays for, a bowl of Chipotle once a month.
Every other month.
So, but you got to get book royalties.
Yeah.
Maybe you can run events like Richard and I do at Surf and Sales. Maybe you can do co-work trainings. Maybe you could do keynote speaking like Roderick does in addition. So maybe you have real estate property income. Doesn't matter what it is. You could have a laundromat business, soda machine business. Doesn't matter. But if you're just thinking, oh, I left my corporate sales job and now I'm a consultant, I'm going to go all in on my consulting business, and that's your only stream of income, newsflash, risky. Very risky. Very risky.
Because we know there's high highs and low lows, right?
Yeah.
And you got to have something to balance those out. Thanks for that share of information, guys. I love it. Know your lane. Don't do things that don't fit for you. All money ain't good money. And make sure you diversify. Nailed it.
All right. Good. Thanks for joining us, man. This was a blend.
Well, we got to figure out, Roderick, are you a beach person? Are you a mountain person? Or are you a house cat?
I'm definitely not a house cat. That's for sure. I would say I'm probably more a mountain person. I like that getting out and just solitude of being able to slow the mind down and become one with nature. I'm not the beach guy because I'm not crazy about sand in my toes. And I'm the only one in my family, by the way. They would all go to the beach 7 days a week if we're up to them. I'm like, you go right ahead.
All right. Well, you see, we gotta work on the influencers in this deal, Richard, before we go right to the decision maker. That's what. Roderick, what's the best way for people to find you, man, and learn more about your company and you?
I am all over social media. I will give you guys my link tree that is consolidated for show notes and such. But for those that are looking on LinkedIn at Roderick Jefferson, you can find me on Twitter and Threads at The Voice of Rod. On Instagram, Roderick_J_associates. Or you can find me on my company website at roderickjefferson.com.
Listen, The Voice of Rod, that is so good. What a hand.
I used to do professional voiceovers. And so
fantastic.
I kind of fell into it.
Roderick Jefferson, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Surf and Sales podcast. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.